When I take breaks, I like to drink tea. Now let's build daily interaction number 33. Hey, what's up everyone? John with WebDev for you, and welcome to the Daily Interaction series, where every weekday we build a new interaction or animation in Webflow. Today we're going to be building a button animation on hover. So here when I hover over these buttons, we can see we have this nice animation. So we have two lines coming in from the left and the right, then a solid block appears from the top, and then the text changes color. All right, so this is what we will be building today. First, we're going to build out all the elements, and then we'll add the on hover interaction. All right, so to view more daily interactions and premium content, visit webdevforyou.com. Also, be sure to subscribe below to receive a notification every time there is a new daily interaction. Okay, so here I have a blank Webflow project, and we'll start with the daily interaction class naming convention. So it's d-the daily interaction number, so today is 33, and then the element. So every element on the site will have a d-33 in front of it, and this is for consistency purposes, and so that we know we're working with daily interaction number 33. All right, so the first thing I'll do here is I'll add an element, I'll add a section, and I'll give it the class name d-33 section. And for the height here for the section, I'll set it to 100 VH or 100 viewport height. So it spans the full height of the viewport, and it will be the full width as well. All right, and then for the display setting, I'll set it to flex, set it to horizontal, justify center, and align center. So anything I place within the section will be in the center. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is add an element. I'm going to add a div block, and I'm going to give it the class name d-33 button wrapper. All right, so I'm going to place all the buttons inside of this wrapper so that if later I want to move all the buttons around, I can easily do that because they'll all be in the button wrapper. Okay, and for this I want to give it a display setting of flex, horizontal, justify center, and align center. Okay, so all the buttons will be in the center. The next thing I want to do is add an element, and I'll add a link block. So right here, I'll add a link block so that we can link out these buttons to a URL, a page section, email, telephone number, or a file. And I'll give it the class name d-33 link block. Okay, and for this, I'm going to set it to a position of relative because we are going to have absolute position divs inside of this link block, and I want it to be relative to the link block and not relative to some other parent element. So by setting it to relative, anything inside of it will be relative to it. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is add the text. So because the link block doesn't have a specific width and height, it's going to inherit its width and height from the elements inside of it, from the child elements. So yeah, here with the link block selected, I'm in the navigator. I'll go ahead and add an element, and I'll add a text block. Okay, and we notice it has kind of this funky blue color with an underline, and that's because it's in a link block, so it's Webflow is giving it the hyperlink styling. So to remove that, we'll just open the link block, or select the link block here in the navigator, go to styles, and then I'll go down to typography, and for the underline I'll say none, so there's no underline. Then I'll go back into the navigator, select the text block, and I'll give it the class d-33 button text. And then I want to scroll down and change the styling for the type. So here in typography, I'm going to set it to Montserrat for this example. I can go ahead and double click on the text, and I'll rename this first one here to websites. and I'll give it the color, this blue color here, and we'll change the font size to something like 44, and the line height, we'll set it to 70. I'm holding down Shift to change it in increments of 10. Shift in up arrow or down arrow. Okay, so we have the text. That looks good. The next thing I want to do is add the border and the solid block. So in the demo, we see that we have these two lines coming in from the left and the right, and then we have this block coming in from the top. So let's go ahead and add that. So here I'll select the link block, and I'll add an element. I'll add a div block, and I'll give it the class name d-33. Let's call this the border block. So this is going to have the left and right border. And for this, I'll set it to a position of absolute and full. So it fills the entire link block. So because the link block has a position of relative, and this block is absolute, it's filling the link block. Because we set it to absolute and full. Okay, and then I'll scroll down to border, and I'll give it here, I just want a left and right border. So I'll select left, I'll give it a solid border, and I'll change the color to blue. And the border, the width is 1 pixel. Okay, and then I want to add a right border. So I'll select the right here, add a solid border, set the width to 1, and the color to blue. Okay, so now if I preview, we have the left and right border. I'm going to go ahead and add some padding to the text, so there's a bit of space to the left and right border. So let's go to the navigator, and I'm going to add the padding to the text because the padding is what's setting the width for the link block. So any changes to the width, I want to make sure that I apply it to the text. So the solid block will also be that width, and the border will be that width. Okay. And I also want to, here in the navigator, I want to bring the button text below the border block so I can select the button text. Okay. So I can either work with the Z index, or I can work with the layers here in the navigator. So by bringing the button text below the border block and making sure that it's set to relative. I also want to make sure it's set to relative so that it does come to the front. By setting it here, I can now select the text within the designer, and the text is in the front. And for this interaction, the text needs to be in the front. So just to recap, place it all the way at the bottom in the navigator, and also make sure the position is set to relative for the button text. Okay, so now for the button text, I'm going to add some left and right padding. So I'm going to hold down Alt and just drag to the left. Holding down Alt adjusts the padding on both the left and the right, and I'll add some padding of like 50 pixels. So now I'll preview, and the border is a bit farther from the text. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add the solid block. Okay, so in the demo, we have the lines coming up and the block coming down. All right, so to do that, let's go into the navigator. I'll select the link block because we want to place it in the link block. I'll add an element. I'll add a div block, and I'll give it the class name d-33 block. And I'll set the position to absolute and full, so it fills the entire link block. Then for the background, I'll also set it to blue. Okay, so we have all the elements. The last thing I want to do is make sure, is select the link block, and I want to set the overflow to hidden because the block and the border block are going to move up and down. I don't want them to be visible outside of the link block. So they're inside of the link block, and we're going to move them outside. So when they move outside, I don't want them to be visible. So by setting it to overflow hidden, anything outside of the link block is not visible. And this will be a bit more clear when we add the interaction. Okay, So yeah, I think we have all the elements that we need. We have the, let's make sure the button text is in the front again. So it needs to be the third element here within the link block. So we have the border block, the block, and the button text. All right, so we have all the elements we need to create the interaction. So let's go ahead and do that. Or actually, before we do that, let's copy and paste the link block 3 more times. So here I'll select the link block, I'll hit Command-C to copy. I'll select the button wrapper, and I'll paste in the button wrapper 3 more times. And I'm going to select the block, the solid blue block, and I'm going to say display none, so we can change the text for each of them. So I'll just double click, say apps, and notice I can select the text. Again, that's because the text is in the third layer and it's set to a position of relative, so it comes to the front. So I'll double click and say branding. So we have websites, apps, and branding. I'll select the link block again in the navigator, and I'll add some left and right margins. So I'll hold down Alt, and we'll add about, let's say, 15 pixels to the left and the right of the link block. Then I'll go back into the navigator. I'll select the block, and I'll say display block here so it's visible again. So we had it display none, and now we set it to display block. All right, so let's go ahead and add the interaction. So to do that, I want to add the interaction to the link block. So when we hover over the link block, something occurs. So here I'll select the link block. I'll go into interactions. Here for element trigger, I'll click the plus, and I'll select mouse hover. So something is going to occur on mouse hover. So I'll select it, and on hover, we're going to start an animation, and we're going to add a new timed animation. So I'll click the plus here, and I'll call this D-33 mouse in. So what happens when we mouse over the link block? So the way it's going to work is we're initially going to have the border block start at the bottom and the block start at the top, and then we're going to move them in, and we're going to have the text change color. So here in the demo, we can see that the first border block moves up, then the block moves down, and the text changes to white. Okay. So what I want to do is go into the navigator, and the first element we want to affect is the border block. So I'll select it here, go into interactions, click the plus, and I'll say move here to move the border block. And let me just do something here so we have a bit more real estate there. So yeah, we're going to move the border block. We're going to move it down on the y-axis, so it moves down vertically. We're going to move it 100%. Okay, so we can see it kind of here. It's moved 100%. We're not going to be able to see it because the overflow is set to hidden for the link block. Okay, so now the navigator, we want to move the solid block. We want to move that up 100%. So here I'll select the block, go into interactions, click the plus, and I'll say move, and we're going to move it vertically on the Y. We're going to move it up negative 100%, so it moves up. So on the Y, we'll say negative 100%. All right, so we can see the word websites. And one thing we didn't do, we want this to be the initial state. So here for timing for both the border block and the block, we want to select timing here and set it as the initial state. And the same for the block, timing set as initial state. So now if I preview, initially the block is 100% up and the border block is 100% down. Okay, and I also want to set the opacity for the block. Here, so I'll select opacity and set it to 0%. Yeah, I want the opacity to initially be 0%. And I'm going to click, hold, and drag so it becomes an initial state as well there. So if I were to go to the link block and to styles and say overflow visible, and I preview, notice we can see the border block here. We can't see the solid block because it has an opacity of 0%. But if it didn't, we could see the block up here. So just as an example, let me go into the interaction. And if I delete the opacity, we can see the block up here. All right, so let me just undo that. And let's set the overflow, or actually for better demonstration, I'll delete it. We'll go to the link block and we'll set the overflow to hidden. Okay, so now we can't see the block or the border block. All right, so let me go back in here and I'll re-add the opacity. Yeah, set it to 0% and set it as the initial state. So the way I want the interaction to occur is I want the border block to move up first and then the block to move down. So because the elements are here in the timed action, I can select it. So I'll select the border block, then I'll say move, and on the Y, we're going to move it back to its original position, so 0%. And for the easing, I'm going to say ease in and out, or ease in out. You can select any easing. I just find that ease in out looks good for this example. And for the duration, I'm going to set it to 0.3 seconds. Again, you can set it to any speed you'd like, but I find that 0.3 works well for this button. Okay, so the border moves up, and then I want the block to move down. So I'll say, I'll select it here, select the block, say move, and I'll move it back to 0%, so it goes back to its original position. I'll also set the easing to ease in out, and a duration of 0.3. And I'll also set the opacity to 100%, so I just have to select opacity, say ease in out, and a duration of 0.3. Then I'll click, hold, and drag, and place it on top of the block so they start at the same time. So we have this nice fade-in effect as that block is moving down. And as the block is moving down, I also want to change the text color to white because right now the text and the block are the same color. So I'll go into the navigator, I'll select the button text, and I'll add a new timed action, and I'll say text color. And for the color, I'll change it to white so we can see it, give it an easing of ease in out, and a duration of 0.3. And I'll click, hold, and drag so that they all start together. So the block is moving and the opacity is coming in and the text is changing color all at the same time. So now if I preview, we can see the interaction looks good. Let me preview again. The border block comes in and then the block comes down and the text changes color. Looks good. All right, so now I want to apply it to all these buttons, not just this first one. So in Webflow, what I can do is rather than affecting a specific element, I can affect a specific class. So we can affect multiple elements. To do that, we can select the elements here in the timed action. And here where it says affect, rather than affecting a selected element, we want to affect a class. So action will affect multiple elements with the same class. So here I'll select it. And here, rather than all elements with this class, so if I were to preview and I hover, actually we can't see it for the other ones. I don't want to affect all elements with the same class. I want to affect only children with this class. So any children that has the class border block will be affected. So here it says action will affect only the elements inside the interaction trigger. So here I want to select it. If we go to the navigator, we know that the border block, the block, and the button text are children of the interaction trigger, which is the link block, because they're inside of it. So only the specific elements inside of this interaction trigger or this link block will be affected. All right. So we want to apply that to all the elements in the timed action. So I'll select the block, select class, select only children with this class. So you can tell that it's we're only affecting a class because we have kind of this blue symbol here. It's kind of a paintbrush blue symbol here. And the same for the button text. We want to affect a class and only children with this class. So if I preview, we can see that still only the first one is affected, and that's because only the first one has an interaction trigger. So we know that the first link block is an interaction trigger because there's this green circle with the lightning bolt. So I want that green circle to appear for all the link blocks so that they're all an interaction trigger and we affect the specific elements inside of each interaction trigger. So to do that, we'll go back into interactions. I'll close this here. And here for trigger settings, rather than affecting an element, I want to affect a class. So I'll select class here, and any element with the class D-33 link block will become an interaction trigger. So if I go to the navigator, I can now see that all the link blocks are an interaction trigger, and because we're affecting the classes inside of it, which are the children elements, only those specific elements for each interaction trigger will be affected. So now, when I preview, we can see all the text, and when I hover over, it's occurring for all of them. All right, looks good. So the last thing we need to do is create a hover out animation so that this goes in reverse when we hover off the buttons, okay? So here I'll toggle preview, I'll go back into the interaction, and here on the hover out, we're going to start an animation. And I'm gonna duplicate the mouse in, so I'll select these three dots on the right, I'll say duplicate, and now we have D-33 mouse in 2, so I'll select it here, and I'll click, and I'll rename this to D-33 mouse out. So here we have all the elements from the mouse in. We don't need the initial states because we already set that for the mouse in interaction. So for the mouse out, I'll just delete the initial states, and we want the animation to occur in reverse. So what I want to occur, let's see. So let me go to the demo here, and so it comes in. So on hover out, the block goes up first, and the text changes color, and then the border moves down. So let's go back into here, and let's kind of reverse the order. So we want the block to start first. So all of this, I'll move it up in the text color so it starts at the beginning, and then I'll just change the values for each one. So the block is going to move back to its original position, which is -100%. So it moves back up. And the opacity, we're going to set it to 0% so it's not visible. And notice that the easing and the timing is the same because we copied those values from the mouse in. And the text color, we'll change it back to blue. All right, so and then the border block, we'll move it back down to 100%. So everything is just going in reverse, and we're starting with the solid block and the text color first, and then the borders will move down. So now I'll preview. So we hover in, comes in, hover out, and it goes out. Just like that. And it's going to occur for all of them because we copied from the mouse in, so we are affecting the class and only children with this class here for the mouse out. All right, so that's basically it for this button animation on hover. It's a really nice effect. It could be a menu as well if you wanted it to. You could have a menu with this effect. You probably just make maybe the text smaller and place it in a different location. Because it is in a wrapper, I can select the button wrapper. Here in the navigator, I'll select the button wrapper, and I can move it basically anywhere on the site by giving it a position of absolute, and I can place it in any location. I could say like top right, so it moves to the top right, and we have the buttons there, which is nice. It looks pretty good when it's flush with the top because it looks like the solid block is kind of coming from the top there. All right, so it's a nice, interesting effect. I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to the center, and looks good. All right, so that is it for daily interaction number 33, the button animation on hover. And let me go back to the demo here, and it looks good. Perfect. So if you have any questions about anything I went over, feel free to let me know in the comment section below for the video, or in the forum section, for members. We can discuss it in the forum section. All right, looks good. So that's it for daily interaction number 33. To view more daily interactions and premium content, visit webdevforyou.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next daily interaction.